Hello every pony, this is Anonymous. Just gonna get a couple of disclaimers out of the way first. First disclaimer. I am not, nor have I ever been, associated with the military of any nation, nor do I have paramilitary training of any kind. I have never handled a firearm, been shot at, or watched someone die, so I can't claim to understand what it's like to be a Marine. As should be obvious by now, the protagonist of this story is purely fictional. His opinions do not reflect the official position of the USMC, nor any members thereof, and his mannerisms are not an accurate portrayal of any particular Marine, nor the Marines as a group. That said, this is not Call of Duty. I will try my utmost to keep the military aspect of this story grounded in reality. I've done my research, and I will strive for technical accuracy. If I make a mistake, please call me out on it. Disclaimer 2. This is a fanfiction based on Hasbro's My Little Pony and K-Cat's Fallout Equestria. This fanfiction is strictly non-commercial. The rights to any pre-existing characters or settings belong to the copyright holders. Please support the official releases. Once upon a time, in the not-so-magical, and actually quite fucked up planet Earth, there was a US Marine who signed up to defend his country. He was assigned to a fire team, the fire team assigned to a squad, and the squad assigned to a platoon. Together, they defended the area surrounding a forward operating base in Afghanistan from insurgents. If only it were that simple. Chapter 1. Of New Wars and Pip-Bucks. As a soldier, you can be sent to any area of the world. You could find yourself alone, in a remote area, possibly in enemy territory. This manual provides the information and describes basic techniques that will enable you to survive and return alive should you find yourself in such a situation. Preface, U.S. Army Survival Guide.
And so I said, "Chicken nuggets? Are you crazy?"
exclaimed Jackson. The two Marines in the Humvee's backseat roared with laughter. I'd missed the setup to the joke, so it didn't really work for me. I did crack a smile, though. Oatmeal. That's right, I'm a brony. Not that that's a secret. There are no real secrets in the company. Relying on each other for our lives seems to make things like TV preferences seem somewhat insignificant. So despite some ribbing, no, Jackson, bronyism is not covered in Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was accepted. Just like Andrew's bottle cap collection, or Jackson's wild exaggerations of his teenage adventures. Hell, it gave us something to talk about. And when you're stuck patrolling the same patch of dirt for 8 months, anything is better than talking about the weather. Let's have an example conversation. Hot today, isn't it? Yes, it is. Just like it was when you asked yesterday. Just like it has been for the past 4 months. So, when you come up to me tomorrow and ask me, "Hot today, isn't it?" my answer's gonna be, "It's still freaking hot, and we're still in a fucking desert." How hot do you think it is? I hate you. My short brown hair was plastered to my head beneath my combat helmet. A few beads of sweat pooling around the follicles, creating an itch I'd learned to ignore. Gold-tinted Oakley sunglasses rubbed against the chin strap, while shielding my eyes from the occasional blast of light when the sun was unobstructed by the cliffs. Earplugs hung on a cord around my neck. According to SOPs written by some rear echelon motherfucker, they were supposed to be inserted whenever I left the FOB. But seriously? Fuck that. I'd rather hear the enemy coming than die with intact eardrums. Some people wonder whether Humvees are comfortable like the civilian versions. They're not. Mind you, when you're wearing 80 pounds of combat gear in 110-degree heat, comfortable is not a term which is thrown around much. Humvees are utilitarian beasts. When it comes to a choice between a more comfortable seat and an extra 50 pounds of armor on the doors, I know which one I'll pick. The seat. Man, fuck armor. Standard armor already stops 7.62s, and if you get hit with an RPG, you're fucked anyway. It's a damn anti-tank weapon, and no matter how much armor you bolt to a Humvee, it'll never be a fucking Abrams. Damn pogs don't think like that, though.
Heard their Marines are tough. They can handle being uncomfortable.
Yeah, of course. Until it comes back and fucks you in the ass when you jump out into a firefight and can't run straight. Andrews was listening to my rant and peeked down from the gunner's turret. "Milan in the armor?" asked Andrews with mock incredulity. "Ooh, tempting fate now, aren't we? Next you'll be saying you're 2 weeks from retirement." It was difficult to tell how serious he was being. We joke about fate and superstition, but at the same time we all have our rituals, the things we do to appease Lady Fate. Little things, stupid things. Andrews wears a cross around his neck that I'd never seen before we deployed. Jackson listens to the same song every day at the same time. Even the sergeant's not immune. He stirs his cereal 3 times before eating. No more, no less. And me? I have my Twilight Sparkle. A little blind bag pony that stays in my pocket. Where my Nox used to be, before they broke. Dust-proof my ass. We believed in luck, yet we mocked the very idea of it. The mind's way of dealing with what we can't control. "Fuck retirement. Only way I'm retiring in 2 weeks is in a body bag," I retorted. "I plan on a long and illustrious career of being shot at, blown up, and unappreciated in some backwater country." "That why you re-enlisted?" he asked more seriously. "What would I do as a civvy?" I deflected. "Get some shitty-ass customer service job and work it for the rest of my life? If I'm lucky? Fuck that shit. I'm a Marine." The first Humvee in our convoy exploded. Or at least, the front of it did. Supersonic metal fragments pinged off our windscreen. "IED!" someone yelled. In the movies, this is where everything would go into slow motion. Real life was not so forgiving. Everything happened nauseatingly fast. No time to think, only react. We skidded off the road in a cloud of dust. I threw myself out of the Humvee, but blinded by the dust cloud, I missed my footing and fell on my face. Tasting dirt and a trickle of salty blood from my split lip, I rose up into a crouch. I'd managed to keep a hold of my rifle. I could hear rounds being fired, impacting on sand and metal. AKs. At this distance, my armor would hold, but that didn't mean shit unless I got hit in the chest. God damn it, where were they? I scanned left. There, up in the cliffs. 10 o'clock, I yelled. Up high! I got more at 3 o'clock, called Jackson. Looks like they're dug in! I fired my M4 ineffectually, wondering why the 50 wasn't firing. I looked back and was met with a sight that, upon reflection, is horrifying, but at the time was just numbly accepted. No time for feelings. Most of Andrew's face had been blown out from a shot to the back of the head. "We're too exposed!" yelled the sergeant. "Get to the cliffs! Pearson, you first! Now, cover fire!" That was me. As my team fired off rounds, I sprinted to the first piece of cover I could find, and dove into a convenient alcove in the rocks. Something wasn't right. I looked more closely, and my blood ran cold. There was a wire sticking out of the ground. "Secondaries!" I yelled as I threw myself back out into the street. The explosion followed. Focused by the rock walls, it threw me like a rag doll, shrapnel tearing into my left leg. I hit the ground. Hard. I guess I must have passed out, because when I came to, it was cold and dark. Really dark. Thick cloud cover blocked both moon and stars. Where the hell was everyone? I scrabbled around in the dark and was relieved when I felt the familiar shape of my rifle. This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Without me, my rifle is useless. Without my rifle, I am useless. An adage endlessly repeated by Boots, and considered stupid by veteran Marines, it nonetheless provides an idea of the bond between a Marine and his weapon. Any Marine unfortunate enough to misplace his rifle will likely experience a sensation not unlike excreting a number of standard masonry blocks. For those who have consumed MREs, this will require little imagination. I switched on the barrel-mounted flashlight, and the powerful beam cut through the darkness. This couldn't be right. I looked around and recognized nothing. The Humvees, even the wreckage was gone. The cliffs were all wrong. Hell, even the dirt was wrong. It was soft and fine, completely unlike the sandy grit that filled my boots. They couldn't have just left me behind. I pulled out my radio and turned it on, cycling through the different military channels. Nothing. This wasn't too surprising. The range on these things is only a couple miles. I put out a few calls, but I wasn't about to hold my breath. Luckily, the shrapnel wound to my leg was not as serious as I'd feared. As I bandaged it, however, I noticed something bulky under my left sleeve. It was so comfortable that I hadn't noticed it up till this point. Rolling up my sleeve revealed some kind of wrist-mounted computer. A small emblem read, Pipbuck 3000. Weird name. I was hesitant to press the on button, in case it turned out to be packed with explosives. In Afghanistan, paranoia saves lives. Eventually my curiosity won out. After all, someone had gone to the trouble of putting it on me while I was unconscious. If they'd wanted to kill me, they would have done so already. The monochrome display lit up amber and revealed a map. Wow, retro, I thought to myself. All of a sudden my vision flashed, and when it came back, I could see a compass in the corner of my vision. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. Some kind of retinal projection? Wow. Take back what I said about retro. There was a direction marked on the compass. A direction I should travel? I looked down at the map and... the fuck? It was navigating me to a place named Ponyville. Since when do Afghans name their towns in English? Someone was having a joke. That, or this was some kind of coma dream. Still couldn't rule that out. But I couldn't quite believe that it was. For now, this was real. You'd probably think that as a Marine, I'd feel right at home operating in what could potentially be enemy territory. That as a veteran of 2 wars, I'd be ready for this. You'd be wrong. Sure, I had the training, but I was a rifleman, not a commando. I lived and fought alongside my 4-man fire team, most of the time with the 2 other teams of the squad backing us up. I hadn't been truly alone in months, and psychologically, it took its toll. With no idea where I was relative to anything, I figured I may as well follow the nav point. I doubted I was within any kind of search area. Heck, probably a different country. Equestria came to mind, but I dismissed it out of hand. Ponyville wasn't that unique of a name, and this didn't look much like a magical utopia to me. Hey, if it was, I'd be giving Rainbow Dash a piece of my mind. This weather was ridiculous. Well, I laughed at my own joke, but really, I was freaking out. So I fell back on my training. First things first, inventory. M4A1 SOP mod, ACOG scope, night vision scope, flashlight, 430 round mags, FMJ. M203 underbarrel grenade launcher with 3 40mm grenades. Beretta M9 with 2 15-round mags. Multi-tool, med pack, standard combat knife, dragon skin armor, helmet, ballistic goggles, sunglasses, digital watch, hydration pack, 2 energy bars, a useless radio, an equally useless map of the area we'd been patrolling, and a mission report logbook. To my surprise, this was all listed out in my, I guess I can call it mine, it is attached to me after all, Pipbuck. Next to each item was a value in caps, whatever those were. The most intriguing thing was the entry next to my armor. Dragonskin armor, human variant. Human variant? As opposed to what? I still couldn't see much as I worked my way towards the nav point, but the ubiquitous mud I was trudging through seemed to confirm my suspicion that I was no longer in the desert. I swapped out my ACOG scope for the night vision attachment. This meant the sights were no longer zeroed, of course, but it'd be good enough for close-up work. Ponyville turned out to be a collection of charred ruins. Only a few buildings were still standing, and even those looked to be on the last legs. No signs of repair either. This town had been abandoned long ago. People had died here. Civilians, probably. Who fucking knew, really? Truthfully, it didn't bother me. Whoever said war never changes never had to worry that one of the civilians he was supposedly protecting could be strapped with explosives, or been forced to help rebuild a water pump for a village that may very well harbor the same insurgents who had just sewn the road back to base with IEDs. There were times when part of me felt it would be better just to drop a damn Moab on the villagers, let God sort it out. The more rational part of my brain reminded me that most of the civvies were decent people, just trying to survive in this hellhole. Being torn so strongly in two directions, helping and harming, saving lives and ending them, my emotions all washed together. Fragile hope and crushing despair, insufferable rage and courageous pacifism. They all collided with one another, creating a kind of destructive interference that just left me feeling numb. Gunshots. In my experience, there's one surefire way to tell some tough guy from a soldier. When startled, tough guys freeze, their reflexes deadened over the years to demonstrate that they have no fear. Soldiers duck. Fragments of brick and mortar sprayed from a nearby wall as it was struck by a bullet that I had little doubt was meant for me. I ducked behind the wall and considered my options. My adrenaline kicked in full force, and I felt like I could go hand to hand with a fucking bear. I took a deep breath and controlled myself. I switched the safety off my rifle, selecting single shot with a satisfying click. I had to PID the shooter. I did not want to be responsible for shooting some overzealous young ANA soldier, even if he had taken a shot at me. It was dark after all, and he could probably see by my silhouette that I was armed. The ANA was not the most professional of armies. The training we gave them was by necessity limited, and they had a somewhat alarming tendency to get high on hash and opiates prior to or even during battle. This wasn't to say that they were useless. Far from it. We had to count on the fact that they would eventually be able to keep the peace if we had any hope of ending this war. On the compass, which still kind of freaked me out being superimposed onto my vision, a red bar seemed to indicate the position of the shooter. Useful, but it still didn't tell me his intentions. Deciding that popping my head out into view of what I was 90% sure was a sniper was probably not conducive to staying alive, I explored other options. "U.S. Marines!" I yelled out. "Identify yourself!" There was no response. I racked my brain to try and remember the phrase in Dari, the local dialect, but was drawing a blank. Fuck. We'd always relied on the interpreters to interact with the locals. U.S. Marines should have been clear enough anyway. It's not like that needed a translation. I had an idea. In daylight, it would have been far too obvious, but in this darkness, it just might work. I was betting the sniper wouldn't have the benefit of night optics. Pulling my combat knife, I stuck it into the mortar between two bricks close to ground level. Making as little sound as possible, I removed them, creating a large enough hole for my rifle and its scope. I lay prone behind the wall, poking the barrel through the gap, and activated the night vision scope. With a high-pitched whine, the area beyond the wall lit up in fuzzy green detail. What I saw shocked me, which was quite a feat considering my already elevated state. What I could see was, without a doubt, a facsimile of Rarities of Carousel Boutique. Who had built it and why was beyond me, but right now I had more pressing concerns. I had to identify the sniper before he spotted the faint glow given off by my scope. I flicked on the infrared laser. The sight wasn't zeroed, but the laser was. Zeroed at 100 feet, mind you. It was offset from the barrel. So if the shot was further, I'd have to adjust my aim right. The invisible beam glowed brightly through the scope, cutting a swath through the air as I looked for my target. Now, it wasn't unusual to see horses in Afghanistan, nor even for insurgents to fight from horseback. So when I looked through the scope and saw something vaguely horse-shaped, I wasn't particularly perturbed. As I looked closer, however, there were two things wrong with it. The first was it was wearing some kind of armored barding, which quite frankly was ridiculous. Insurgents could rarely afford armor for themselves, let alone their horses. The second, and more important problem, which I had to believe was some kind of trick of the light, was that it was riderless, and somehow levitating a rifle above its head. I took my eye away from the scope, and sure enough, I saw what could be the faint glow of telekinesis around the rifle, about 50 yards away, which meant that I was seeing things. The rider's clothing must be deflecting the light peculiarly, messing with the scope. Not being completely insane, as far as I knew, I wasn't willing to entertain the other option that was staring me in the face. Still, I'd PID'd the target. He was definitely armed, and even if I couldn't see him, from his armaments, he was not NATO or ANA. Cleared hot, I whispered to no one, not used to working alone. This wouldn't be the first person I'd shot, but it still wasn't something I enjoyed. I went over my rationale again. If the rider was going to see my scope glow, he would have fired by now. But I was well aware that he was probably not alone, and if I fired, it would give away my position as surely as sending up a flare. The fact that I couldn't see anyone else through the windows was making me nervous. Could they be trying to flank me? Could I slink away without being seen? Probably not. There was a lot of open ground before the next piece of cover from the sniper. What was my evidence for him being hostile? He'd seen a lone, armed figure walking towards his camp, and taken a literal and figurative shot in the dark. Hell of a reason to kill somebody. I might have done the same thing. Fuck this war. Why couldn't this shit ever be black and white? Give me a bunch of goddamn Nazi zombies to kill any day. The ROE was clear. I could shoot him now. And I was probably going to have to. Completely inappropriately, a thought crawled into my head as I felt a hard piece of plastic dig slightly into my chest. What would Twilight Sparkle do in this situation? Probably go insane like me and start thinking about imaginary characters. Fuck! No. I knew what she'd do. She wouldn't do anything. If her friends were here, she would take the shot to protect them, just like I had in the past. By myself? By herself? She wouldn't do it. Because she would never be able to live with herself afterwards, even if it was in self-defense. But I wasn't Twilight Sparkle. I calmed my breath, exhaling slowly, and aimed roughly 1/2 meter above the horse's head, where the rider's chest should be. I was a Marine, a trained killer. I pulled the trigger. My rifle cracked authoritatively, the vibration knocking the scope out of focus. Piece of crap, I muttered, smacking it with my gloved hand. Never see this shit in Call of Duty. The scope sputtered, cutting to black, then blurred back into focus. I looked and observed. No effect on target. The rifle was still exactly where it was before, appearing to float amid the blackness. Seemingly without warning, it started firing wildly. A trained individual should have been able to spot my muzzle flash. The insurgents were many things, but highly trained was not one of them. At this rate, he'd run out of ammo before he even saw me. Right, I thought. New plan. Wait till he starts to reload, then shoot the horse and run. It always seemed kinda slack to me to shoot enemy animals. A favorite tactic of insurgents was to strap IEDs to pack animals, the safest way to disarm them being to detonate from a distance. They didn't have any choice after all, but if it was him or me, it was going to be him. I shifted my aim lower, keeping the laser on the horse's head. Might as well make it quick. I saw the clip drop from the supposedly floating rifle, and took the shot. This time the effect was immediate. The rifle clattered to the floor, followed shortly by the horse. The gunman was still nowhere to be seen. I rose up into a crouch and started moving away from the wall. But then I saw another red bar on my HUD. This time I knew what it meant. I spun left and flicked on my flashlight. My assailant was shocked by the sudden brightness, but not as shocked as I was. There was no denying it now. This creature, charging at me with a rusty machete clenched in its teeth, wearing blood-stained leather armor, was a pony. Not a small horse, but an honest-to-God, fucking friendship is magic G4 pony. The enormous eyes and bright blue coat left no doubt in my mind, leaving me to wonder what kind of substance I could possibly have consumed to make me trip balls like this. Fortunately, I didn't have time for a protracted questioning of my sanity, my survival instincts forcing me to accept instantly what would no doubt have taken hours of intense introspection to come to terms with. I was in Equestria. The pony resumed his charge. While the ROE was strict, not that I was under any obligation to follow it at this point, charging a US soldier with a rusty knife was still more than enough to get you shot. That said, the ROE was far from my mind as I fired 2 shots into his center mass. He stumbled and fell. A pool of blood spread out like an oil slick in the blackness of the night. My little pony, lying in a pool of blood. The show was just about the only thing in my life that I considered wholly pure and innocent. It would be a lie to say I'd never imagined living there. Of course something so pure could never survive contact with me. More red bars, behind me this time. Eyes in the back of my head. I was starting to like this pitbuck more and more. Flicking off my flashlight, I sighted the first target and fired. The shot went low, the green pony stumbling as her foreleg shattered. Another gunshot rang out, but not mine. Fuck, that hurt. The round hit me in the shoulder. But fortunately it was of low caliber, and my armor did its job. I rounded on the shot's location, and put a round through the offending pony's head. I turned to face my last opponent, but he was already upon me. At the last second, I think he may have realized the folly of going up against a creature twice your size in hand-to-hoof combat. But any such thoughts were cut short, as I brought the butt of my rifle down on his head. There was no cute little staggering around like you might expect from a cartoon pony. Instead, he hit the ground like a sack of bricks. Footnote. Special, James Pearson. Strength, 7. Perception, 8. Endurance, 6. Charisma, 4. Intelligence, 6. Agility, 6. Luck, 4. Perk added. Marine. Your years of combat experience grant you +1 to perception and strength, as well as a 25% accuracy bonus when wielding rifles or semi-automatic pistols. Trait added. Human. Your dexterous hands give you an extra 15 points each to repair and survival, but you suffer -1 endurance and -50% movement speed over open ground. Due to your alien appearance, equine characters may flee from you or attack without provocation. Author's note. Fallout Equestria, as a fanfiction, and Fallout, the games, do not exist on the Earth the protagonist came from.